Welcome to the last but not least Plan and Track talk. I'm really excited to introduce our last speaker from Atlassian, Claire Maynard. Claire has been at Atlassian for 3 years, working on several different growth teams. Her main focus is to measure, understand, and optimize our product's user experience in order to grow Atlassian's user base. In her free time, she loves to run, hike, and bike ride. If you're able to catch up with Claire after the talk, ask her about her killer brunch parties and what makes them unique. Please welcome Claire Maynard to the stage.
Thank you, Danielle. Okay. So I started at Atlassian about 3 years ago on the online marketing team. And before I started, I was sort of under this impression that Atlassian had everything figured out. They were this fast-growing company that had all of this data, and I would join the team and run marketing campaigns and be able to build dashboards and know exactly what my marketing campaigns were driving. So after I started, I figured out I was pretty sorely mistaken. When I joined Atlassian in 2013, we didn't actually have Google Analytics conversion data set up to track what traffic was actually leading to our product signups. I was pretty shocked that a company of this much success and growth didn't actually know where a lot of their product signups were coming from. So yeah, I wasn't part of this sort of magical team that knew everything about their growth and where their products' signups were coming from, but I did get to be a part of a team that went from knowing where none of our product signups came from to now knowing where 90% of our active users come from, even down to the dollar. Today we have a 70-person growth team at Atlassian, running experiments, measuring our funnel, understanding our users, and it's been such a privilege to be part of it. I'm not going to tell you about every sort of detail into how we sort of grew our growth team at Atlassian, but I am going to give you the 6 strategies we've learned over the last 3 years, that have given us been able to build this growth team and grow our user base. So hopefully these are strategies that you can take home today and use it within your own business. So I'm Claire Maynard. I've been at Atlassian for about 3 years, and today hopefully you can take away some of these strategies that we've learned. So before I get started, I want to really talk about what is growth. So growth is a mindset applied to product development where the true north is user growth. So every strategy, every tactic, everything we do is in hopes of growing the user's base. Here at Atlassian, we have dedicated growth teams that are not actually building features. They're running A/B tests, understanding our user experience, and trying to optimize that experience so we actually grow our user base. So these are the 6 strategies I'm actually going to talk to you about today. I'm going to talk to you about how to measure your user acquisition funnel. I'm going to talk to you about how to find your product's aha moment. And then I'm going to talk to you about how to kind of diagnose that funnel and optimize it through experimentation. And then the other part of the equation is really understanding your users. So at Atlassian, we have a growth team that actually uses a lot of user research to create user experiences to better help our users understand our products and see the values quickly. And at the very end, I'm just going to give you sort of a brief overview of how you can kind of build a growth practice in your own organization. So to get started, I want to talk about measuring your funnel. And what I mean here is your user acquisition funnel. And we call it a funnel because you have a ton of users that come to your website at the top of your funnel, and then they go through a certain series of points where they may drop off. They may not see value, or they may leave for some reason. And that's why we call it a funnel. So who here has heard of the AA, RRR metrics? No one here, or also called the pirate metrics. 1 person, 2 person? Okay, cool. So I'll go quickly through them. So basically, the pirate metrics were coined by Dave McCure, and they're really to give you metrics to understand your user acquisition funnel from acquisition to activation, retention, revenue, and referral. And these metrics are really going to help you understand where you're losing and where you're gaining users or customers so that you can do something about it. So just as you would use a GPS to sort of go on a road trip and understand where you're going to go, you're going to use your funnel metrics to understand where you really need to add your resources to improve your user growth. So I'll quickly go through them. So acquisition is when you acquire a user. And for SaaS companies, this really means a user signs up for your product. So what I want you to think about here is all the things that you're doing to drive user acquisition. So usually you think of marketing tactics like SEM, SEO, social, sort of those campaigns. But what I want you to also think about is what you're doing is once you get people to your website, how are you actually showing them value? And how are you making sure that they actually sign up for your product? And then you have activation. And so activation is when a user actually uses your product for the first time. So here I want you to think about what are the things that a user sees when they first jump into the product, and how are you getting them to see value in those first 30 seconds or first minutes in the product, because that's really key. And then you have retention, and this is basically when a user continues to use your product. And this is really important because if you don't have a great product market fit, you're not going to have great retention, and you're going to see a lot of churn. And if this is a problem area for you, then you don't really want to waste time on driving more acquisition, right? It's just people are just going to end up leaving. And then you have revenue, so a user pays for your product. And you might say, okay, well, I have a product where a user pays up front, but what this really means is a user or an account is showing you that they're seeing value in your product by increasing the amount of money they're giving you by either adding users or getting additional features. So it's really showing you that they see more value in your product. And then referral is basically the ultimate goal, right? A user likes your product or service so much that they go and share it with their friends and family without you having to actually do any marketing behind that. So these are the pirate metrics. And what I want to point out here is that you don't have to follow these metrics how I've presented them today. They could be in a different order. What I want you to think about is, are you measuring some sort of funnel that indicates that a user is seeing value from your website all the way to when they purchase, so that you can understand where you're sort of losing and gaining customers. So I'm going to give you an example of a JIRA funnel that we actually created a few years ago. And as you can see here, we actually have additional metrics besides the pirate metrics to give us a better sort of pinpoint idea of where we're losing customers. But we still have those main pirate metrics. A user signs up for JIRA, that's acquisition. A user signs in for the first time, that's activation. They purchase, that's revenue. And then they stick around for 90 days, and that's retention. So we still have those, but we've added a few other ones just to give us a better detail into where people are really seeing value. And what I want to sort of hone in here is all of these things actually show you that a user is happy, right, with your product. And that's what it's really telling us. This is what your funnel metrics are really going to tell you. But I want to jump into one part of this, and that's activation. So why are we measuring after sign-in, created a project, created an issue, created over one issue? Are those really signs that a user is seeing value in JIRA? To be honest, they're not. The reason why we measured them is because we could, and we just expected that that's what people would do when they signed into JIRA. But this sort of brings me to my next point in my talk, is around finding your product's aha moment. Because what you should really be measuring is an indicator in your funnel that a user is going to be retained. And so this is kind of like your aha moment. So who here has heard of what a product's aha moment? A few people. So it's typically described when a user first sees the value in your product as it relates to them. So they think, aha, I can see why this product is so much better than the one I'm using today, or aha, I see how this can help me and my team. So does anyone here know what their product's aha moment is? No one. Okay, well, you should. The other point to this is that you not only want to think about your product's aha moment, but you want to think about all the steps that a user has to do to get to that aha moment, because typically those are the things you can measure. So for example, Facebook, their aha moment is when a user feels connected to their friends and family. But Facebook couldn't measure that feeling, so what they can measure is 7 friends in 10 days. And so this is going to give them sort of a point where they can get every user to 7 friends in 10 days, and it kind of drives every team towards that metric. So same with Dropbox. Dropbox's aha moment is when a user realizes that they can share and store anything in the cloud, but Dropbox can't measure that, so what they're going to measure is the first time a user uploads one file to Dropbox, and it's really simple. But for JIRA, we didn't know. We didn't know what JIRA's aha moment was, and we didn't know what that leading indicator of that seeing that value was. So we set out to find it. But how? So about a year ago, Modeanalytics published this blog that basically gives you the tools to understand what any product's aha moment is, and they called it the aha meter. And basically what you can do, these slides will be up later, just so you know, you can get that link. But basically what it does is you can plug in all of your users' actions into this aha meter, and it'll correlate them the most with retention. So if you think about JIRA and all the actions someone does inside the product in those first 7 days, it'll correlate those with if they've stuck around after those 7 days. So I'll walk you through some examples. So we plugged in a whole bunch of sort of actions in JIRA to see what we could find. So here you can see in the green are all the users in JIRA that are retained after the 7 days. And then in the purple, it's all the users that created 8 issues. Now, as you can see here, most users that created 8 issues are retained in JIRA, but then there's a whole bunch of other users that are not retained, that are retained that didn't create 8 issues. So that's kind of a rarely taken action and not really a good sign of an aha moment. Then you have, here you have all the users in JIRA that are retained in the green, and then all the users that created at least 1 issue in the purple. And what you can see here is that most users that are retained at least created 1 issue, but then there's a ton of users that created 1 issue that aren't retained. So that's not a good sign either. So what you're really trying to get to is this aha moment. And this is where most users that are retained took this action, and then most users that took this action are also retained. And that's really what you want. So you can actually go and use this tool yourself. We plugged a whole bunch of different actions into this to figure out what JIRA's aha moment was. And what we came up with was 5 aggregate DAO. And that's daily active users. So what that means is 1 user who's active over 5 days, or 5 users who are active in 1 day, or any combination of that. And this is where we saw the biggest overlap between retention and user action, or account action. So this was really great. It wasn't sort of a magical sort of action that we expected to find, as easy as Facebook's, but at least it gave us something that we could kind of rally the troops around and get people thinking, like, okay, how do we get each account to have more active users? So the second part of this is once you've found that, you want to add your leading indicator of that aha moment to your funnel metrics. So we added over 1 daily active user to JIRA's funnel. So basically, this will give us a good sign and sort of give us the health of JIRA as it stands today. So now I want to talk about how you can actually go and, I've talked about measuring your funnel. I've talked about finding your product's aha moment and making sure that you're adding that leading indicator to your funnel. And now I really want to talk about how you diagnose that funnel, and then how you actually put things in place to optimize those things that you find. So first of all, shout out where you see kind of the biggest drop-offs in this funnel. Can anyone say the most obvious drop-offs? Yeah, so a few people said it. So sign-up form to sign-up. So this, actually we saw that 38% of people that reach the sign-up form never actually sign up. So this is a big red flag for us. Landing page, yes, there's a big drop-off there, but a lot of people get to your landing page and realize that they're in the wrong place. So sometimes that's not the only metric you can look at. But if someone went to your landing page and they actually went through the effort of seeing how to sign up, and then they actually didn't, that indicates a problem, right? And there's a lot of optimizations we can do there. And next, they have, this one was pretty interesting to us. Basically, there's 12% of people that actually sign up, and then they don't sign in. So they went through all that trouble, and then they never actually sign into JIRA to see the value. So there's a ton of things we can do there as well. Anything else? So there's a big red flag because this is our aha moment, right? Daily active users. And we saw that 57% of accounts never had over 1 daily active user at this point. That's a huge red flag. So now that I have my funnel metrics and I've sort of understood the health of JIRA, now I can really do something about it. So I've indicated sort of 2 parts of the funnel that we really want to focus on. So landing page optimization, how can we really optimize that form so that more people are signing into JIRA and signing up for JIRA? And then it's all about activation. How are we onboarding people into the product so that they become more active? And without this sort of funnel metric, I would have never understood that. I wouldn't have known where to put my growth or development resources. So that's why it's so important to measure your funnel and even measure subparts of your funnel. You could break this down even further. Think about activation. There's so many things that a user does within your product, and you can measure all of those things. So now that you know sort of where to focus, this is the point where you're actually going to start running experimentation to optimize that part of the funnel. So I want to walk you through what actually an experiment is, because I know not all of you are doing this in your own organization. So what's an experiment? You start with a problem. So 38% of people come to our sign-up form and they never sign in. That's the problem. Then you're going to go and develop a bunch of hypotheses as to why you think that is and what you could do about it and what you believe will actually make that sign-up process better. And you formulate those with, we believe this change, simplifying the sign-up form, will result in a specific outcome, whatever metric you're trying to move. In this case, it would be signups. And then because we have rationale to say this, we believe it's sort of overwhelming the current sign-up form that we have today. So then you're going to run your A/B test. And what an A/B test is basically a control versus a variation. And your control is your current experience, and your variation is what you're testing. So basically, whatever change you wanted to see, if it improves signups, that's what your variation is going to be. You're going to give 50% of the users one control, and then 50% the variation. You're going to run your experiment and run an analysis. And if you've significantly moved your sort of success metric, then you're going to productionize it. It's so simple, right? But my point here is that you're probably, after you've been doing this for a while, you're not actually going to find that many successes that you can productionize. So what you want to really get good at is increasing the cadence of experimentation and building hypotheses and running A/B tests so that you're constantly improving and testing many different things. Here at Atlassian, we're probably running 15 different experiments at one time across our funnel because our teams have gotten really good at increasing this cadence of experimentation. So we use our own tools to actually help facilitate this process. So JIRA software, we have a huge backlog of experiments in JIRA software that we can prioritize however we want. We use Bitbucket. All of our experiments are in a Bitbucket repo, and each experiment is a different branch. And then Confluence. Confluence is key here. We put all of our experiment designs, we put our results, we put all of the details of each experiment we run in Confluence so that other teams can come back and see those same learnings, and we can kind of build this encyclopedia of learnings of all the experiments we've done. So I'm going to give you an example of JIRA and an experiment we ran just to give you an example. So we started with a problem. 38% of users don't sign up once they reach the sign-up form. And there's tons of things you could do here, right? So we held a brainstorming session. We're going to come up with a bunch of ideas. One thing we honed in on was basically simplifying that sign-up form, right? And so we created this hypothesis. We believe that giving visitors a shorter sign-up process will result in an increase in sign-ups because visitors will be less overwhelmed. So that's our hypothesis, and then we're going to design our experiment. So this is the experiment. Our control on the left, I apologize, it's a little bit hard to see, is basically our current landing page for JIRA. As you can see, it's really long, it's super detailed. We have a video up at the top. We actually have a button that you press to get to the sign-up form. And our theory was if we move this sign-up form actually onto the JIRA landing page and make the landing page a lot simpler, more users are going to sign up. So in our control, that's what you see there. It's a lot less detailed, and the form is right on the page, the first thing you see. So raise your hand if you think the control won in this case. No one. Raise your hand if you think the variation won. All right, majority. All right, drum roll. Boom. 141% increase in signups. That's awesome, right? We were popping champagne, celebrating, it was fantastic. We'd unlocked it. Then we looked about a week later, and we saw that after that 7-day trial, in the variation, all the users that were in that variation had a 1.59% purchase rate. So basically, after the trial, hardly anyone was actually going to purchase, and in our control, 36% were purchasing. So there's a huge learning here when you're running experimentation, no matter what part of the funnel. You always want to measure subsequent impacts of experiments. So in the last case, our main goal was to increase signups, which we did. But then when we looked down the funnel, we actually had a negative impact on conversion rate, and that's really important. Always remember to look at that cohort of users that got your variation and make sure that you're not screwing anything up down the funnel. So we run a ton of experiments at Atlassian on our landing pages, in product, and all of this. I'm going to go over one more experiment, but as I don't have time to go over a bunch, I wanted to just give you some sort of optimization tips that we've learned over the past 3 years. So first of all, test your call to action, so your CTAs on your landing pages, and personalize them. Stop trying to use learn more, try now, buy this. People have fatigue to those type of CTAs. Try to personalize it and have it relate to what you're doing in your business. Second, one CTA on the landing page. Don't distract people. Remove any unnecessary clicks to get to the sign-up form. Like you saw in that previous example, we brought the sign-up form to the front to remove that friction. However, it didn't work for us, but test it out in your own business. It may work. Remove any fields that are unnecessary from the sign-up form. If you don't need it, don't ask it. It's just going to cause more friction. And then add proof elements like a privacy policy or a security seal, and always try to remove friction when you can. So I've talked a lot about acquisition, and now I want to talk about activation, that second sort of part of the funnel where we saw we were sort of hurting. And with activation, the main mission is really to give your users a great first impression of the product. So as soon as they sign in, what are you doing? What do they have to do? What are you showing them? What's the first thing they see? What kind of email are you sending them? These are all things that are really important when you have a product, because people are going to judge you in the first 30 seconds. But to be honest, you could test a whole bunch of things when you're talking about onboarding. So this brings me to the next strategy that we're talking about, and that's really understanding your users. It's really hard to create a great user experience if you don't know who your users are, and you don't know what their underlying motivations are. You don't know why they're trying your product, anything like that. I just went to Georgie Bottomley's talk on this. You should definitely listen to it. It was about how to run sort of user research at your own company. It'll be recorded online later, and she goes into a lot more detail on this. But anyway, up until now, we've talked about that kind of quantitative side of measuring your funnel and how to do growth. So that's going to kind of give you the what and the where. But the qualitative side is going to give you the why. It's really going to tell you who are your users, why are they in your product, and it'll better give you a chance to create a user experience that they're going to like. And we like to use this in growth because we don't want to just experiment on everything. We want to have the best chances of success. So you really need both when you're doing growth experimentation. So I want to give you an example of how we used qualitative data to run an experiment on JIRA. So basically, back to the funnel, we saw that 57% of accounts never had over one daily active user in them, and that's a huge problem. But we really didn't know why. So we looked at our current onboarding in JIRA. And what we had was a new user would come in, and they'd get this 12-step onboarding process. And this sort of onboarding showed users how to set an avatar, how to create a project, how to create an issue, all of this sort of stuff, all this extra hand-holding. And then they could finally get dropped into JIRA. So we decided we wanted to run some user research tests on this. So we invited a whole bunch of recent JIRA evaluators in to see if we could ask them a series of questions. We also sent out a survey to ask them a series of questions on, what are your pains? Why are you using JIRA? How long have you been using JIRA? A whole bunch of things. And what we actually found was pretty simple. We actually have 3 types of JIRA evaluators coming through our door. We have the newbie, who is brand new to issue tracking, brand new to project management and JIRA altogether. We have an experienced user who's been using JIRA for a very long time, knows exactly how to get started. And then we have this switcher who has used another issue tracking tool, but not necessarily JIRA. And as you can see, our 12-step onboarding guide was really only catering to this new user. And we really weren't giving anything to the experienced user or the switcher. So our hypothesis was, we believe by offering onboarding options for each of our evaluator personas will result in more active users because they will be able to get to their aha moment quickly. So basically, we designed this new onboarding, which we called Choose Your Own Adventure. And what this did was it catered to each of those personas we just talked about. So for the switcher, we actually gave them a way to import all of their issues from any issue tracking tool right into JIRA right when they signed in. So they're like, oh, this is so easy, right? And then for the experienced user, we just let them get started. Start with a fresh project, and you can go set it up how you want. And then for the newbie, we actually put in a bunch of demo data so that a user didn't actually have to go through the process of setting up a JIRA project. They could kind of play around how they wanted. And we user tested this, and it tested really well. And that's the fascinating thing about user testing, or the great thing about user testing, is that you don't actually have to go and build this. You can come and have users give you feedback on it before you put those development resources forward for it. But it tested well, so we actually did want to run an experiment on it. So our control in this case was the 12-step onboarding process, and the variation was this Choose Your Own Adventure experience. So if I can get a drum roll. 27% increase in active users in JIRA. And this just goes to show that listening to your users, bringing them in, and understanding what their motivations are, how well they know your product, and what they really want to do when they first get into your product, it can have tremendous results for you. So that's a key learning. Understand your main user personas, and give them a clear path to their aha moment, no matter what it is. So I'm getting to the end of my talk. We've talked a lot about measuring your funnel. You need to add your leading indicator of your aha moment to your funnel, diagnose your problem, run experiments to optimize that experience, and ultimately increase the number of users using your product, and then understand your users. So now I kind of want to talk about how to build sort of a growth practice in your own organization if you don't have one already. So organize your teams. Like I talked about before, you want to measure your funnel and identify these sort of key places where you want to optimize, and then organize your teams around that. If you're in a small team, maybe you can only work on one at a time, and that's fine. Start with the biggest problem and have teams that are running experiments in that area, and then move on to the next thing. And then find a process that works for you, right? Some of our teams use Scrum here. They work in sprints. They hold retrospectives, and that really works for them. Other teams use Kanban or KanPlan, the new JIRA software feature that gives your Kanban board a backlog, because it gives them developers sort of freedom to just pick any experiment off the top of the backlog as they want. Our web experiments team uses JIRA Service Desk because they're getting requests from all over the organization of where they want to run landing page tests. So they need a queue to work through that. But it doesn't really matter what your process is as long as it works for you. What's important is that you're going to increase your cadence of experimentation. So like I said before, not all of your experiments are going to be successful, and it's very rare that you find a success. So what you want to get good at is this experimentation and measurement cadence so that you can test many things and not just a few things. And what I want to point out here as well is that this shouldn't only be your growth teams doing this. You should have all of your engineering teams thinking in this matter, right? So here at Atlassian, we actually had growth teams that embedded with engineering teams so that they could spread that knowledge. So they'd have a growth team, and they would learn how to run experimentations, run analysis, get really good at that, and then we'd go and have them sit on a development team that was maybe building a feature that they wanted to go and test and iterate on, and they sort of knew that practice a lot better. So that's really the key here. You want all of your teams thinking about this, not even in just engineering. You want marketing, customer service, running experiments, and learning. So measure and learn. That's sort of the main point. So next, I'm just going to give you 3 sort of tips on how you can really increase the cadence of experimentation in your organization. So generate a lot of ideas. You want to hold brainstorming sessions with a bunch of different people from different functions of the organization so you get a broad range of ideas. Our design team called these disrupt sessions. They basically break people out into different groups and give each group a different constraint. So your users are outside, or think only about scarcity, or think only about this one persona. And then you have to switch constantly. And it's really, we do this so you think of out-of-the-box ideas, and you sort of get yourself out of thinking of just of sort of those main things like moving a button or changing the color. You want to think out of the box. Once you have a ton of ideas, you want to sort of hone in on those best ideas, and what we use is ICE. So basically, ICE is impact, confidence, and ease. So impact is really, if this experiment was successful, what's the impact it's going to have on the organization? Is it big? Is it a big impact? What is the confidence that we're going to actually see success in this experiment, that it's going to be significant? And then ease is basically how easy is it to develop. You don't want to do sort of big experiments that take a long time to run because it's probably going to fail. So really what you want to focus on is the MVP. You don't want to be going and developing this huge experiment, right? If there's a learning, do what's necessary to sort of validate that idea and then measure its impact so you can quickly get ideas, right? Go through ideas quickly. All right, so that is the end of my talk, but I want to just say to all of you, if you don't know right now, you want to go back to your organization and you want to ask them, do we know where we're losing and gaining the most customers? Are we measuring our funnel? Are we measuring sub-funnels within our sort of macro funnel? Are you running experimentation to optimize the experiments for running experiments to optimize the experience for your users? And do you know what your product's aha moment is? If you don't, you really should, and you should check out the aha meter and see if you can figure it out. Are you bringing in users to your organization? Are you asking them why they're using your product? Are you understanding sort of their underlying motivations? And then do you have that sort of growth mindset across your teams? Is everyone in your organization sort of thinking, how can we make this a better product? And that is all I have for you. So thank you. Questions?
Awesome. Thanks so much, Claire. We do have time to answer a few questions. If you haven't opened the app and asked questions already, please take a moment to do that now and upvote the questions you like. But we'll just get started with the ones from the top. Okay. What tool do you use to collect statistics from your projects?
From our projects? From our products? So we actually...
This says projects. Was there someone here that asked the question?
I think what they mean is what tools do we use to gather sort of the data that we're running all of these experiments and analytics data on. And a lot of that is in-house. We've sort of built our own tools to analyze this data, and we have a huge database of sort of all of these actions that users are doing within our product that any one of us can kind of query at any time to figure out what users are doing. I will say for our website optimization, we use Optimizely. It's a great tool. It's really easy to get set up, and it's very user-friendly. But for the in-product stuff, we actually built sort of homegrown tools to get that data and run our experiments.
Okay, I think this relates to the first experiment. What kind of activities do you do to identify the real problems?
Activities do we do? So some of the things I talked about, so first you want to measure your funnel to really understand the what and the where, right? So you saw JIRA's funnel, right? It gave you a breakdown of where we're really losing users. But then, like I said, you really want to bring in users and understand what they're feeling when they're getting to your sign-up form. That could have been a way we tackle that problem, right? So we could bring in a whole bunch of users and have them go through the funnel in front of us and ask them questions like, do you feel comfortable entering your information here? What do you think is going to happen when you click next? And that feedback's really going to allow us to create a better experience for our users. I hope I answered that question correctly.
What did you do to fix the landing page sign-up issue after you found purchases decreased?
I see. So basically, we did a lot of things on the JIRA landing page. As you could see, it was like a really long, detailed landing page, and there was a lot of distraction and a lot of clicks that users had to do. So we actually simplified our landing page a lot. We did keep the sign-up form on a separate page because we saw that actually the multi-step was actually more successful than the single step. But we did simplify a lot of things on that landing page. We're actually experimenting now on a lot of new things, like taking away the video because we noticed that nobody's clicking on the video. And how can we have something more interactive that just kind of automatically shows you how JIRA works instead of a user having to click the video?
What is still your greatest challenge in the sales process, and what kind of experiments are you deploying to optimize?
So I don't know if everyone here knows, but Atlassian doesn't really have a sales cycle per se, so I'm not really involved in that sales side of things. I think some of the challenges we have is that there's so many moving parts at Atlassian. There's so many products, and there's so many different funnels that we're having to deal with. So I didn't really get into this today in my talk, but we have, I think, like 6 different growth teams at Atlassian, and they're all running experiments at the same time. And that can be really challenging because you don't know sometimes what experiment led to what impact. And sometimes our web team will update something on the website and won't run an experiment, and it'll impact experiments that we are running inside the product that can sort of alter results. And that can be really challenging. So right now we're really dealing with how do we compartmentalize these sort of groups of experiment teams and make sure that they're not overlapping. It doesn't really have to do with the sales cycle, but I don't know much about sales, so sorry.
What differences do you focus on for server enterprises improvements?
So currently at the moment, we don't actually have too much any in-product data on our server clients. So it's really hard for us to understand how server clients are actually using our products. Most of the data we have is in cloud. But what we can say is that probably that usability is very similar, right? And we can also do a lot of usability studies with server clients to understand really how they're using our products. We don't do experimentation on the server side currently in product, just because it's all behind the firewall and we're not able to go there.
Okay, and the last question, can we use these steps to test out the product feature's adaptability when developing a feature? If so, what steps would you change? I think it's asking.
Yeah, so I guess if you're working on a feature, you're going to want to do an A/B test on various specific sort of part of a funnel. So like I said, that was kind of a macro funnel, right? Your user acquisition funnel is going from acquisition all the way to purchase. You're going to really want to hone in on what is a user trying to do when they get into your product to use that feature, and break down that into its own sort of sub-funnel or micro funnel and see all the steps that they're taking and measure each of those steps. And then what you're going to want to do is, if you have any hypotheses as to why maybe someone is not using a part of your feature, is you can still run those A/B tests, like I said. Depending on the feature, it may take a lot longer to run because you may not have enough users sort of coming down and using that feature in order to reach significance. So in that case, you could also do usability studies and actually get people to come in and look at different various parts of that feature and tell you what they like or how they sort of feel about it, or what they would expect to happen when they use whatever it is.
Awesome. That's all we have time for. If you have any more questions for Claire, you might be able to catch her for a few minutes afterwards. Yeah, sure. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy the rest of Summit, and thank you, Claire.
Thank you.